Welcome to another episode of the Dad Schooling Podcast. I am your host, Fatherhood Reforged, and today our guest is Benjamin Black. How you doing, brother?
Doing well, thank you, and thanks for having me on. I appreciate you taking the time for me.
Yes, thank you so much. Second episode. Thank you for being available. Big time difference. Ac-
Yeah, I mean, it's worse for you than it is for me, I
Ironically,
think.
yeah, but arguably better.
Yeah,
It seems
well,
to be
depends on
seems to have a lot of
depend.
trouble with the states and organizing with the states
Yeah,
because
funny that,
there's a shorter difference, but with 11 to 12 hours between us, it
hmm
seems and your ungodly sleep schedule.
Don't get me started. Or we can actually get into that if you really want.
But do you want to give a brief introduction of yourself? You know who you are, what you do, or what you stand for, family life, etc.
Sure thing. So, as Alex said, I'm Ben Black. I am the founder of Dynasty and a couple other businesses as well. I full-time work for myself, entrepreneur, if you will. Though I'm not a huge fan of the term, with the stigma that gets attached to it now. I'm a homeschooler, obviously, and we have three kids. Stay-at-home wife, and we live in 10 acres in rural New Zealand, Canterbury. Pretty good life we've built for ourselves here, and hopefully today we're able to touch on how the guys inside Dad Schooling can do something similar for themselves.
Awesome, awesome. I didn't know. He had a good 10 acres. That's pretty cool.
It's a bit of space. It's it could be a
Yeah,
lot to manage, but I would actually like 90 more. I'd like to get 100, mainly just so there's a bit more distance between us and the neighbors.
yeah, yeah. So one of the reasons I extended the invite, we've been connected for a while now, outside of Dad Schooling as well, on Twitter at first, and then through Lords of X, which I'll let you explain and get into that when um whenever you feel it's appropriate. Save me miscommunicating what it is or what the purpose is, and you can do the pitch. Um, but yeah, so it's been we've connected on several different levels, and you've got a lot of information to share. I value your insights. I respect the life you've been building for yourself, and I think those elements of your life and how you've gone about building it and the responsibilities you've taken on and will really resonate with some of the dads in the dad schooling community. Will really be beneficial for them to just to hear some insight on how it's done and how you've made homeschooling more feasible. I know many people feel the financial burden or the financial difficulties are too much, or at least a big weight on people's shoulders. And even if the dads are already homeschooling, I mean, a side hustle, more income it's never a bad thing. Or, well, it
It depends on how much
to a
work it
certain
is, I
extent.
suppose.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
yeah,
yeah. But everybody's interested in potentially making alleviating the financial burden on themselves because homeschooling, does put that additional burden on whoever's earning.
so did you have a specific question there? I mean, maybe I missed it.
No, no, I mean, um, look, let's start with. I think we should start with Lords of X, and if you can give just a brief intro as to what that is. That to me that feels like one of your big focuses at the moment, and
Yeah.
it's almost like there's a direct connection there between Dad Schooling and Lords of X in terms of the value in a male only space and the value in brotherhood and the
Mhm.
value in men getting together to help each other and build each other up and push each other forward.
Yeah, so I put lots of X together as a paid private group for men to get the growth on X essentially and help build a family empire by leveraging X as a tool. So inside of it, we've got things like courses, accountability, feedback, and also distribution to help you get more eyes on the content that you're creating so you can grow your following faster. And the reason I put it together primarily was to give men that space that they need in order to get feedback effectively, because there are other groups like this out there, but there's nothing like Lords of X, and it is very curated. We only let a certain type of person in there, and there have been instances where people have tried to join and I've refunded them because they haven't been a good fit. So I really like to keep it to a certain type of person And if you're in the dad schooling community, then you're likely to be that kind of person. As men that want to try and make the world a better place for their children through their content and through the businesses that they're trying to create.
Yeah, awesome. And there are a few, we have a few crossover members between dad schooling and Lords of X, so that bodes well.
Yeah, definitely.
But it really takes a certain type of mindset to go ahead and make that sort of space for men. And I mean, like you said, it's a paid group. So and you've put a lot of content together for it. I'm a member myself, and I'm aware of how much time and effort you put into that, and how much time and effort you put into making content and pushing that as a viable source of income for you and your family. I mean, can you talk more to that sort of mindset? I mean, I'm sure there's many people out there with skills and with knowledge and with understanding there's a need out there, but sort of translating that from, yes, I have this idea, to a reality, to becoming an entrepreneur. I know for me, it's been very difficult because I've always been a 9 to 5 guy. And I think that works for some people, but it doesn't work for everyone.
One thing I like to mention to guys that I work with is that we are us 24/7. Like I have to be pen black all the time. I'm always in my own head, always thinking about things, always have these concepts that seem relatively either benign or just like common knowledge as far as the audience of one is concerned, which is me. But to other men, they aren't well known. They aren't even necessarily on their radar. So, for example, all the content that I create on X or Twitter, can we just call it Twitter? I hate X.
Yeah.
So, yeah, a lot of the content I create on Twitter is tailored towards men that want to create generational legacies for their family. So, for example, I am a big fan of family unity and sticking together, and I personally believe that homeschooling doesn't necessarily have to, but it can play a very large role in that. And when I say have to, I mean, you can probably still do it without homeschooling, but you're going to have a much, much harder time. And the reason I leverage this knowledge is because to me, I'm in this mindset all the time, and I'm always thinking about what I can do for my family and building an empire and getting my kids hyped up about it as well. My son, whenever I take him out in the car, I always get him hyped up about it. Because we have an e-commerce store, we run from home, and he's always excited to deliver parcels and to work in it because it's part of building the family empire. It's what we're working on together. So, but I'm living it. I'm in there. I'm always thinking about what I can do, but for other men, they aren't. It might not even necessarily be on their radar. They might have heard of a Dynasty before, like in Dynasty Warriors 8 or something on PlayStation 2 or whatever it was on. And that's like their only exposure to the idea of a dynasty. And it's actually much more achievable for most men, probably even now than it has been in the past 100 years. Prior to that, it's a whole different story. The definition of it's slightly different. But for most men now, it's actually quite achievable. But it doesn't lie in trying to amass wealth, which is what they quote unquote would have you believe. It actually comes down to the culture that you're able to forge for your family. And again, homeschooling plays a large part on that, but it's also like a deliberate act of almost cultural engineering within your family that you have to do in order to achieve this. And most guys don't know where to start. And I have made a place for them to start, which is following me on X, for example. And then I put together resources for them to take it to the next level. I've also put together resources to stop other forms of media sabotage in their family culture, like with my screen course, for example. 3 weeks of screen-free kids. Media is a huge form of cultural sabotage for a family. And by removing that factor and that influence on your family, you're better able to direct your family in the right way towards creating a level of cohesion that will last longer than you do.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if I answered your question exactly there.
No. It's great because you've led me onto something that's relevant and quite coincidental. So today I posted into the chat on dad schooling just a brief video I made on the way to the gym this morning when I was walking to the gym this morning, and it was talking about men's spaces and talking about homeschooling and the female dominance in the space, because usually the mothers are the primary educators. We've proven that's not the case in dad schooling, but that's usually the makeup. And so that lends itself to most, if not all, of those types of spaces being predominantly, female. The members of the groups. I know my wife co-runs a local co-op, and it's basically just all the mothers that get together. There's one or two dads that get together here and there, schedule depending. I know at least one of them self-employed, so he can kind of work around and come and help out. And I mean, I jump in handsome when I can, but again, I've got the 9 to 5. But the point is that I was actually trying to highlight how there are all these men's spaces that are great and needed, very important in today's society. A resurgence, it looks like, which is great. They've been sorely missed, but I can almost guarantee none of them would ever talk about homeschooling. And
I would agree with that. Yeah.
if they do, there's going to be very few that talk about it, very little. But in actuality, there's the decision to homeschool and the decision to take on that and make sacrifices to accommodate that is actually a decision of legacy, as you've just pointed out. It is actually taking control of your legacy, taking back control from the state, from the media, from all these external influences that would otherwise try and undermine or separate the family unit, split it up. And so actually that decision is a very masculine thing to consider. Legacy, kings for centuries have been obsessed over their legacy. But in the last few decades, our society has completely cast that aside because now, self is king and all that. Our culture is very self-focused, and we're encouraged to live for ourselves. So the whole concept of legacy, I find, is intrinsically tied with homeschooling. It is, if you want to pass down your family values and virtues into the next generation, you really need to be taking an intentional approach of fostering that culture. And a huge component of that for me is homeschooling. And then of course you've got other components, and part of running your own business is that component as well, because you're, as you just said, you're there sort of instilling those values, and I don't want to say running it with them, but setting them up to run it with you and involving them in that process. So I think legacy is a huge part of that, of homeschooling, that's very much overlooked.
Oh, for sure. You teach who you are as much as what you know. And that's very true for your family culture, perhaps most true for your family culture. And if there's all these external factors coming in and kind of tainting that, it's a lot harder to maintain that same level of cohesion within your family. Like you look at the transition that's happened in the last sort of 70 years and how quickly the idea of multi-generational family unity has been eroded.
Yeah.
We've had the rise of retirement homes, which I've invested in and done very well, by the way. But you can see these trends coming a mile off, and it's not people like you or I pushing it. It's people that are ironically trying to build family legacies that are pushing these ideals on people. The whole "you can't take it with you, he who dies with the most toys wins." They're just these asinine sayings that have worked their way into the common vernacular that are really truly insidious. Like what might have started as like a funny thing to say have more or less manifested into reality, and now they're working to sabotage our families and act against everything that we should be trying to build. But for some reason, most men either aren't interested or they just don't know that it's possible.
Yeah, for sure. And it's I think that's as you said, big component is the decline of multi-generational living. And most of us would balk at the idea of living with parents, living with grandparents, that sort of thing. But
let me interject there then. The reason that we do that now is because from a dynastic standpoint, you can't go backwards. You can't go backwards and alter your family culture that's been established for as long as your parents have been alive. But you can change from when your children are young, preferably from when they're born, but when they're pre-teenager, it is the optimal time to start adjusting your family culture to accommodate for that. The reason that we think, I don't want to live with my mother or mother-in-law or whatever it is, which isn't true for everybody, but for the vast majority of people it is. The reason we think that is because the family cultures that have been established historically, recent history, but historically, don't suit the agenda that we're trying to build. And I tried with my family, perhaps foolishly, to go back and try and bring them into this grand vision that I had, and it just wasn't compatible. And I would argue, wouldn't even argue, I would state boldly that that is true for 90% plus of
Yeah,
people.
I I
So
imagine
the
it is.
focus,
And
yeah, well, the focus should really be put on your children now. You can, it's like the whole circle of influence thing. You can spend 100% of your energy trying to influence 100% of the culture of the world and get 0% results. Or you can spend 100% of your energy trying to influence that 0.0001% of the culture of the world and get 100% results. And that, however many zeros are added in their culture, is your family. That's where you put your energy into. And through that effort, your children will then go on to have the same impact on their families, and so on and so on. And then within 3 generations, we've changed the world. But if we're all constantly out there worried about things that come totally outside of our control, then we're the ones who wind up getting controlled, because it just makes us weak, because we don't have that unity that we need in order to make the change.
it's a fair point, and I completely accept that point. I th I know from experience it's hard to go to go backwards and change the minds of previous generations and get them to understand the concept you're trying to explain in terms of legacy, in terms of, I mean, in terms of everything, in terms of the influence media has, in terms of, you know, anything, big food, big pharma, that type of thing. It's really
Tell me
difficult to
about it.
get
Yeah.
to get them to shift any form of mindset or
Mhm.
adopt a new culture than the one they're ingratiated in. And it's going to be really difficult. I imagine most people are first generation starting those cultures. I know there's plenty of people out there that aren't, and kudos to them that have the great family culture already built in. I'm sure we have in the dad schooling community multi-generation homeschoolers, and I see them regularly online at the very least. But I think most of us fit into that boat where we're almost going radically changing the trajectory of our family line. And
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
that's going to be a pretty scary process. There's moments where I find myself, and this might sound very egotistical, but there's moments where I find myself thinking, when I'm trying to accomplish what I want to accomplish through dad schooling, through Twitter, through connecting with men like yourself online, that actually sometimes it dawns on me the decisions I'm making now are, you know, changing the trajectory of my family in ways that I never thought possible. And
I
that can
wouldn't
be
call that
quite
egotistical. That's insightful, because it's really, when we parent our children and the influence that we have on them and other factors for that matter, we aren't influencing just our children. We're going to influence people we'll never even meet. And I don't mean people
Mhm.
out there in the world. I mean people deep in the future. One thing that happens now that we mess up or handle well might influence our great, great, great grandchildren, just through the
Sure.
butterfly. I don't like the term, but the butterfly effect, that
Yeah,
these
yeah, I get it.
moments are vital to us and to our
And
children and to our family. And I don't think that's an egotistical thing to think. I think that's just pure insight. That's your
well,
wisdom coming through there.
maybe that's flattery, but no, I meant,
Not at all.
but the point being is that can be quite a scary thing for many people, certainly if you're just coming into it. Um, and you seem quite confident, quite well read, well rounded. You have a lot of content based on that. I think one of the good things outside of homeschooling, because most of the dads that are going to be listening are going to be well versed in that sort of element of influencing their family legacy. But perhaps outside of that, where do you think is the easiest place or the first place people can start, and all the baby step people can take to start taking more control over over their legacy? Start building the dynasty now.
So there are four areas of capital that I think it's important for men to be aware of that are trying to build a legacy. So they are human capital, intellectual capital, social capital, and financial capital. And they're in order of importance. So you've got it covered with homeschooling and being in dad schooling for your human capital. Those are the people in the culture that you're trying to build. And far be it from me to tell you if you're already on that right path, I'm not going to tell you exactly what to do within your family culture. That's really up to you. But you generally have a fair, if you're aware enough of it, you generally have a fair idea of where you want to go with it. But the other three areas, intellectual, social, and financial, are also important. Intellectual, also semi-covered with your homeschooling, but that's more of like the knowledge that you have within your family as well as the secrets. And when I say secrets, I don't mean like, dark secrets of things that have happened in the past that are better left unsaid. I'm talking more about like knowledge that gives your family an advantage that you might not necessarily want other people to have. For example, and I will talk about my e-commerce business if you like, but within my e-commerce business, I frequently get asked by people in real life, like out there in the world, exactly how I built it, where I get my products from, and it's like, why would I tell you that? So you can build the exact same thing and try and compete with me. That's my family secret. So I built this business that I spend 2 to 4 hours a week on and makes, not massive money, but it makes enough for us to get by. And that frees up my time to do other things. Why am I going to tell you that? Who are you? I just met you at my daughter's friend's birthday party. I'm not going to give you my lifetime's worth of experience in one conversation so you can try and copy me and probably not do it well and then hate me for it. So that's intellectual capital. And then you have social capital, which is the connections and ties that you've made, as well as your reputation. So, it takes a lifetime to build up your reputation, but it takes an instant to ruin it. And then you compound that for your entire family. Well, it takes generations to keep and maintain that reputation, but then one bad apple can ruin it. So focusing on your social capital is also very important. And that will also coincidentally lead you to help build financial capital. So financial capital isn't necessarily the individual wealth of people within the family, it's the collective family wealth. So the money that's meant for everybody to be used as a resource to improve the creative competency of the individuals within the family. So for example, there's multiple ways to build that, but one of the most common that is believed to be the only way, which it isn't actually, is the great accumulator method, which is where you have one individual who has a large event that helps make them a lot of capital, which they then forego for the sake of their family. And that works for some people, but it doesn't work for everybody. So there are other methods in which you can apply the similar principles to build a sort of an egg of wealth, or more like a chicken coop full of chickens worth of wealth that will perpetuate itself to help support your family for generations to come. And we can touch on that as well if you like. But yeah, that I would say the best place to start obviously is your human capital, but then also your intellectual capital. And by understanding these concepts and being aware of them, then you're able to leverage those to help develop your family further than the average family would, who is typically not even focused on the human capital. And that's kind of a broad statement for me to say. And let me just let me just cover myself there for a second. What I mean is, they're not as focused. Like obviously, everyone cares. Well, nearly everyone cares about their kids, nearly, but care about their kids in such a way that they are deliberately taking them down a path where family unity is prioritized. That's what I mean.
Yeah, no, I understand that. There's a difference between caring about your kids and being intentional and being deliberate with your plan and your lessons and your values and virtues, trying to instill those in them. And I think that's that's the big thing about legacy and the big thing about capital. And I think you could, the order's spot on there in terms of importance, because we'd all, if we had a choice, we'd rather pass, if we had to make a choice, we'd rather pass the values and virtues we hold dear down to our children than financial capital. We would, if we were forced to make those choices, that would be top of the list. Values, virtues, love, that type of thing. Because that's how the legacy lasts. Like you said, the whole butterfly effect. That's how the legacy lasts. Money can be squandered, money can be spent, money can be lost. And I suppose, values and virtues could be, but, money is a lot more tangible and a lot more a lot more easily lost or a lot more easily squandered or wasted. Whereas that that butterfly effect you mentioned, where the moment we get right now can impact generations down the line in ways we never even know. We're not just, and that's the I've seen that quite a bit on Twitter is, act like you're parenting or act like you're making decisions for your grandchildren. Make decisions now for the grandchildren you don't have. Um, think about, the decisions you make for several generations down the line, and how are they going to, how will it impact them? It's not as even as simple as something as simple as exercise, getting in shape, changing, because I used to be in much worse shape, and I still have a long way to go on that journey. But making that decision now, it's going to impact, to go from um, a line of very out of shape, very um, poor health family to changing that trajectory will now impact my kids and impact their kids and impact their kids and impact their kids. You are the man who is in control. You are now the linchpin and the focal point at which the trajectory can change, and we can go, down the line unhealthy, 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 and just decide to at this point in the chain to be healthy, and then the family line continues along that path instead.
Yeah, so and it's a lot of pressure, man. It's a lot of pressure that's put on us, whether people are aware of it or not. But understanding that pressure and what we do with it is really what counts. We can
Yeah.
spend our time being worried about it and cave and be crushed by it, or we can do something about it and make it change. And yeah,
Mhm.
sometimes it sucks, man. Sometimes we got to do things and they suck. I'm not a big fan of I like lifting, but I'm not a big fan of taking the time out of my because I'm a workaholic, so I'm not a big fan of taking the time out of my day to lift. But when I do it, I enjoy it. But yeah, it's easy to the easy way is seldom the better way to go. In fact, I would say
Mm.
99% of the time it is the always going to give you the worst outcome. Whether it's through challenging, I mean, depending on the situation, of course. I don't want to make too broad a statement there, but depending on what our goals are in life, we need to be willing to put in the work to achieve them. There comes a time in every man's life where he's got to work hard, and if you don't do it now, somebody's going to have to do it later, and
Mhm.
it might not even be you. You might squander your whole life on Netflix and potato chips, but then your children are going to suffer for that. And then if they want to improve their lot, then they're going to have to work hard and work harder than you would have had to.
Yeah.
Even through our diet and our exercise, our epigenetic profile changes, and that is hereditary. It can actually impact the quality of our sperm, for example, and therefore the quality of our children, which again is alterable through their lifestyle growing up as well. So it comes down to more than just making the decision for ourselves. It's making the decision for people we'll never even meet. Imagine if everyone in our bloodline took that mentality of perpetual creation instead of reaching stasis or entropy, and how great things could be for our descendants in 2, 3, 4 generations from now. It's almost unfathomable to think about how much power that would bring to a family.
Oh, absolutely. And I think the point you made at the beginning really emphasizes the importance of cultures and places like dad schooling, like Lords of X. Men, it comes a point in time where men need to work hard. And yes, it does suck. But if you have a collection of other men around you that are able to hold you accountable, spur you on, help you through those rougher patches where you don't feel like putting in the hard work, and even drive you forward and support you when you're doing those bits of hard work, much like some of the support I receive in Lords of X, and hopefully some of the support the men support receive in dad schooling around, what's the best approach, what's the best resources, that sort of thing. If we can help each other, we can really begin to alleviate that burden and make, oh, it sounds really cliche, but make men great again. make men take more responsibility and take back control and have the courage to. I think that's a big thing, is when you're sitting there alone and, society's telling you to be indulgent and to be wasteful and to be comfortable. It's quite fearful to step outside those bounds, especially when you're on your own. And I think the values and virtues held by society have shifted so radically away from um, what's beneficial to the family unit and what's beneficial to the individual nowadays, that to step away from the confines of that system that's been put in place can be quite very lonely, and can be very, very daunting and very frightening. I know I've never met and connected with men in my real life like I have on the men I've found on Twitter, Lords of X. I mean, even dad schooling, some of the guys have been fantastic in being active and social, and we've connected quite deeply. So I think that comment it really emphasizes the importance of those types of spaces.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I've made a mistake. Like you know what I mean when I say lone wolf? I made
Yeah.
that mistake. And I think a lot of guys
Mm.
fall into that. And I don't know where it came from or why people think it's the right way forward. I don't know why I thought it was the right way forward, but no man is an island. And we need other men to help support us and help grow the skills that we need to help lift us up when we're feeling down. A lot of the cultural shift has been towards, men, being quite isolated, I think. And
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
communities that we used to have to support us in a world that we no longer have anymore, those institutions or organizations have kind of not grown in the same way. Like my grandfather had a butchery, for example, and he was a part of several clubs there, but the world's gone a different way since those
Mm.
eras where you could, open up a corner butcher shop and, clear the modern equivalent of 500,000 a year. And it didn't even have any business skills. She just opened the shop up, and
Yeah.
nobody had a choice but to go to you. So those days are gone, and the institutions that helped the men back then build and become what they were, they haven't adapted, and we're on this the world that we're in now, where everything's kind of gone online, and men are working more now than ever online. I mean, I was a tradesman for most of my career, but there was no like good organizations there to support men in trades. The closest thing we had was like depressed men in trades. Like, I would help you not be depressed, but you still got to work the trade. And it's like, well, hang on a second. There's like that doesn't seem like the right step to go. Like, okay, it's good, prevent people from being depressed, but there's a root cause to that, and it's the isolation that comes along with it, the tedium, the lack of sense of fulfillment, because now we're not in this world where we're admired for our crafts and the things that we build and create, despite the fact that we built the world. It's like when we do our electrical, well, I was an electrician and do my electrical work, it's not like I'm building a house and pointing to it and saying I built that house. I'm working on a machine inside a factory down a back street that nobody ever sees. And it's in the sense of like problem solving, it was rewarding, but it wasn't rewarding in the sense that I had an outlet and a place to share that. And
Mm.
with these spaces that we have online now, these are like the next level of organization to help people, help men in particular, find that place where they can share and belong effectively and support each other as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And the internet's been a wonderful thing in that sense because, as I said, geographically, I don't really know any men on the same page as this,
No.
but globally, I know quite a few now.
Yeah, exactly. Well, yeah, that's exactly it. Like, I think we're like men like us are on a resurgence now, but we still have to try and find each other in the world, and because we have the lines of work that men are typically in, and perhaps their upbringing plays a role in this as well. It's not as easy to find each other effectively, but the internet has brought us. The internet's a blessing and a curse. You can use
Oh,
it
for
as a
sure.
tool to serve you, or it could be a shackle to hold you back. But if you're aware enough to use it as a tool to help you and serve you, then it is that blessing, and you can use it as a means to help elevate your life to a whole nother level. I built multiple businesses online, nothing massive, not multi-million-dollar businesses or anything like that, but done well enough for myself that I've been able to build them, sell them, build income streams that help support my family, find work that way for my electrical business, etc. And it's been a tool that served me. But at the same time, I can easily see how you could get roped into these things that are going to hold you back. For example, I never labeled myself a gamer, but I was into video games for a good long while.
Yes,
And
myself too.
you can see how the dopamine feedback loop in those can keep you roped in. One example I would like to use is I don't know if you know the game, but Stardew Valley. Now this is like a game
Yeah.
about farming. For those of you out there who don't know, you start off like this bare patch of land and you develop it into this farm. I don't even know what the objective of the game is. Just the number goes up. You keep making more money, but there's like not really anything that seems to happen. It's not like you're trying to go on some grand adventure or anything. You kind of make the fun. But the whole dopamine feedback loop and the gameplay loop is based on the fact that people like to create. They start with this raw patch of land and they want to build something with it. And it's fun to see the land develop. You start with like a little garden plot, and by the end of it, you've got big fields and cows and all this. But you could take that same energy and channel it into building something in reality. That's what I've done with my land. We're building a new 300 and something. I don't know exactly how many square meter garden at the moment. And I'm channeling that energy into that. I'm channeling that energy into building my businesses up. And I highly, highly, highly suggest other men out there do the same. Don't let these media forms, and there's nothing wrong with relaxing. I'm not saying you have to like suffer permanently, but using that same energy, that same creative, that raw masculine creative energy that every man has. Every man has an entrepreneurial spirit. It's just how you channel it. You've got to harness that and put it into something that benefits you and suits your personality. You might not necessarily have the time in your day to build an e-commerce business and import 20 grand worth of stock to build something up. And that's fine. Maybe you can spare a bit of time in the day to research REITs, real estate investment trusts, and you build up a REIT portfolio that gradually generates more income, and you become an expert in that. Maybe you build up a Twitter account and you help men with their fitness or with their homeschooling, like you have, Alec. Or maybe you start up a local donut stand or something. I met a guy who did that the other day. He delivers our gas, but he does a donut stand on the weekends, and he has that entrepreneurial spirit. And rather than sitting back and watching Netflix on a Saturday or whatever it is that people do on Saturdays, every day is both a Saturday, Monday, Tuesday, everything to me. But whatever people do on Saturdays, he's channeled that energy into running a donut stand. And he does that with his son, which is really cool. Now he's taking that entrepreneurial spirit and then fostering it in his son. So they're there for
Building a dynasty.
Donut stand. Yeah, exactly. And it's really cool to see. And if we can do it and we can harness that energy and not let it get hijacked by these video games or TV shows or whatever it is that people do that ultimately isn't beneficial for your family, we can channel into things that are. And that's what every man, in my opinion, should be doing. Because if we all did it, then just imagine how much more in the world, how much more good there would be, and how much more we're able to create. We have these sculptors of history that have spent months crafting sculptures, and at the end of it they can stand back and say, look at what I've made. And now the world saves those. Look at what they made. We have the opportunity to do that now by leveraging the tools of the modern age, whether it's building a business using the internet, running a donut stand on the weekend, or creating works of art if that's something that you're really passionate about. We can do that and channel that into our children as well, rather than let their brains be hijacked by these hyper engineered games. By the way, the modern games, I have not played Fortnite, but I have read how they have built their algorithm. They basically use the same principles the gambling industry use to keep kids roped in, and I'm sure it's fun to some degree. And Jake Montalbano, he plays that with his sons, but he limits them severely on how much they can play, which a whole different story. But from what he explains, he's like, oh yeah, it's hyper addicting, and that's why he wants to limit his sons, because it's engineered in such a way to keep them going. But that's energy that could be put into playing sports, or could be put into building a business, which they're now interested in doing, because Jake's doing the same thing, by the way. So there's the way that we influence our children has to primarily come from us. If we hand them over to Fortnite, if we hand them over to Stardew Valley, these natural instincts inside every man are going to be hijacked and then channeled into the wrong things. And then before you know it, we have all these men that are out of energy by, and I get it, man, out of energy by 8 at night, and don't want to put it into anything else. Whereas they could find their passion. I mean, I'm sure, people are out of energy, but they've got enough time and remaining gas in the tank to watch some show on Netflix. Just take that same energy that show's trying to hijack and put it into building a business. You find something you're passionate about, you find something you really like, you can build it. It's possible. The internet, that your biggest advantage, your biggest unfair advantage in the world now is the fact that you are a real person. Just because Coca-Cola has this big name brand that's 100 and whatever years old, and they they made all their money by selling people cocaine effectively, doesn't mean you don't have an unfair advantage now. You can leverage the same kind of principles and building a brand that is you, and channel that into a way to create a legacy for your family. It's a good creator, a good business owner, a good person that influences everything in the business doesn't say, look at me. They say, look at this. And that's what you have to do as a business owner these days. You can be the face of it, but the spotlight isn't on you. You're the man behind the spotlight, pointing it at the right things.
Fantastic piece of advice. And I was the guy who invested a lot of time into video games, a lot of his evenings, most of his evenings, most of his evenings.
Yeah, right.
And since coming out of that sort of, I don't know, static dopamine loop, I find myself, I rarely play. Firstly, I rarely play them now, and that's not even a conscious choice. That's just I know that I don't feel fulfilled when I come off them. Sometimes it's great. I'll spend an hour here and there, fantastic. But to go back into that sort of cycle, that wasn't fulfilling. And it's the Jordan Peterson quote, and I'll paraphrase: "Don't chase happiness, pursue fulfillment." And so I get it. I was there. I did it, and it's easy. It's too easy. Um, but yeah, when you're building a purposeful life and you find something that is a passion, but not just a passion, a purpose, a reason to, it really does energize you.
Oh yeah, big time, yeah. And you don't even necessarily have to build. Man, you should if you can, but you don't necessarily have to build a business that is surrounding your passion. I won't talk about the specific things that we sell in our e-commerce store, because if I did, you could probably find my home address. But the things that we sell, I have no background in. I have no like professional knowledge about, outside of like a little bit from my trade. But it's so distant from it that you could basically say it's nothing. But by taking the passion that I have for building something for my family, for creating things online, for building websites, for design, for drawing, because I don't know if you can see it in the background, but I got a kid's book. It's about there, that I draw the art for, and combining all these things into building this online store. I am passionate about it, and I like what I've put together, and now I've given my children the opportunity to work in it as well, and that helps drive me and make me more passionate about it again. So it's like this compounding effect. And in saying that, if you just took the products in isolation and I didn't have a business behind them and I hadn't channeled the things that I am passionate about into the business, I don't care.
Mm.
I'm not interested in these things. But because I have framed it in such a way that I am passionate about it, I have built this business that I spend 2 to 4 hours on a week, and it makes a decent living, enough for us to get by on. It's not going to make us. I mean, I could build it up if I really wanted to, and it would make a significant amount more income. But my focus is on Dynasty, and that's what I'm truly deeply passionate about. But I still managed to build this other business that I'm not terribly, at least as it pertains to the niche and the products, I'm not terribly passionate about. But I've still been able to build it by channeling my passion into that.
Mm. Yeah, no, that's fantastic. And I think great point you made, perhaps unintentionally, is that sort of there's two elements to building that legacy. There's two elements to building that dynasty. And the first, of course, is to invest heavily into your children, and everything centered around that homeschooling, um, passing down those values, etc., being intentional in parenting. But the other half then really is emphasized by how much you work on yourself and how much you value yourself and how much you invest into you in order to be the type of person who's worth emulating, who's worth listening to, who's worth respecting.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, if you're not passionate about something enough that you can't get your 3-year-old son excited, then you're not, you don't have enough passion in you. You've got to be able to drive and direct that enough to channel it to excite a 3-year-old. Even if it's about a post that you did on Twitter. If you can't get your son excited about it, then you're not passionate enough. You need to find that reason to be passionate and drive it forward more.
And I guess just very briefly, we'll touch on it because I know time's getting on. But surely, the whole multiple business streams, working for yourself, that's got to play a huge role in homeschooling your kids.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. So, for example, I think I mentioned it briefly. I say a lot of things, so maybe I mentioned it earlier, maybe I didn't. But my children help in our e-commerce store. They obviously can't help much with Dynasty. It's a very content-heavy business, very high level thinking kind of stuff. At least I
I'm
like to
sure if
think
you
it
put
is.
some videos out with them, they would.
Yeah, I'm not a
If
big
they
fan of
did
putting
some
my
voiceover, if they did
yeah.
a
I was
voiceover,
actually yeah, exactly. Well, I was actually thinking of doing a video series where I help my kids start a business. Um, it's on the cards. I might do it. It's a lot of extra work, and I'm not sure if it's like a needle
sure.
mover right now. But I was thinking of doing that. But I'm not a big fan of putting my children on the internet. Back of them, fine. Faces, no. My son actually interrupted our podcast the other day, and I had to cut that bit out. He said some very profound things, like that he needed to pee. So, but so yeah, what I was saying is the e-commerce store. My children do help on that, and I've used that as a tool to help educate them as well, like reading larger numbers. I got a tape measure that's, I like to work in millimeters. I'm a tradesman, but my children, getting them to read hundreds out is next level above double digits. So I got a tape measure with centimeters on it, and when they measure the passes that enter the data into the computer, into the software that prints out the labels. They help pack them. They help pick them. They help read things off the screen, select people's names. I'm not a big fan of kids in front of screens, but they're learning to use it as a tool rather
Yeah, of
than just sitting
course.
there passively watching something. So my daughter knows what, if I say click on the tab that says this, she'll click on the right tab. If I say send it to this person, she'll know which one to click on in the label software. If it's a particular predefined box size or pouch size, she can pick it. If we have to measure it, she knows where to enter the custom numbers. And now my son's learning the same thing. And it was at first, man, it would take me so long. Like I would be like, all right, we're gonna sit down, I gotta tell you this, I gotta come over, I gotta double check everything. What number is this? No, it's not 61, it's 16, that kind of stuff. But now it's at the point where it's actually a help. Like she comes in, she goes on the computer, and I can just stand there and measure boxes. This. She would bang, 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 done. I don't even have to tell her to push tab. I don't have to tell her which label to print out. Just print out the cheapest one. We're not sending it overnight, so that kind of thing. And it's actually a help now. And for every parcel they pack, they get a gold coin. And not real gold, it's not that profitable, all right? They get a plastic gold coin. And if they get 20 of those, they can swap them for $20, which is then theirs to keep and use how they see fit. And as a result, when they to date have barely spent anything because they see how much work it takes to make that money. And it's given them a tangible, real world value to associate to things. So you want to spend money on this toy? Well, that took you 20 parcels. And it's like, oh wait, that took a long time. That was a lot of work. Okay, I don't want it that badly. I was giving them this real world value to attach. And more than that, I'm showing them now how they can multiply that value. Like my daughter has spent $30 on chocolates before and made a box, painted it, written out the labels and everything. And I've taken her door to door knocking to sell chocolates. And she bought them for $1, selling them for $2, and she nearly sold out as a result. And then the last ones we just get, we were like the insurers, so we bought them back off for $1. So she wound up making a profit on that, and then now she has more money that she can reinvest either back into chocolates, but she wants to do with her brother. But more than that, now she's looking at starting her own e-commerce store with her brother. It's just a matter of finding the right products and product line that she wants to build out. And then once she starts that, that'll be like a whole nother thing that she's got, a whole other skill she's got to learn. But then in saying that, I have the skills to teach her because we have the intellectual capital within our family. I can teach her how to build a website. I can teach her how to do the CSS. I can teach her how to do the logos and everything like that. So she could build out her own store by leveraging the skills that are within our family. And by giving them these opportunities, I'm teaching them how to provide real world value rather than just giving them an allowance. And oftentimes that allowance isn't even attached with work. I'm not sure what most people's stance is, but my stance on allowance is don't do it. When was the last time you got paid for washing the dishes? You know,
Yeah.
never. Well, maybe when I was a kid, but I don't think I even got paid then. So because I probably didn't do them. But the idea is, by giving your children these chores to do and not paying them for them, they are learning that it's just part of being in a family. It's part of being in a functional
Yeah.
household. Doing the chores is just part of life. Sweeping the floor, part of life. Mopping up after there's a spill, part of life. Feeding the dog, he's going to starve if you don't feed him. It's just part of life. I don't feed the dog and he doesn't give me $1. He's a dog. So, it's about teaching them that chores are just part of life, and then how to provide real world value to people, taking chocolates door to door. Okay, yeah,
Sure,
they could
sure.
go to this, they could go to the store and buy the chocolates for themselves, but they didn't, because it was more convenient for them to come to their door. And
Hmm.
cute bait helps too. A
Yeah,
little
I
little
bet
girl
it
holding a
does.
box
I
of
bet it
chocolates makes
does.
it a little easier to sell. I mean, if I went door to door with a box of chocolates, I don't know how many I'd sell.
No.
But it's about teaching them how to provide real world value and work with what they have. So
Yeah. And I think
embodying that's really, really powerful for your kids.
a beautiful overarching point, and I think a great point to end this on, that you, again, that it's been sort of a thread throughout the entire conversation, is how interwoven everything is, how interwoven sort of the business is, the health is, your homeschooling is, your parenting, how instead of treating these as all separate different things, as many of us just naturally do by default, and there's nothing inherently wrong with that, but instead of treating them as separate things, realizing how interconnected they are, realizing how interwoven it all is. The decisions you make about your health can impact your family. Starting your own business and sort of or side hustle can bring the education and the intellectual capital of your family up rather than just the financial capital, and how that can influence homeschooling, and how homeschooling can influence the business and all of the family culture. Just how interconnected all those moving parts are is really the key to building a legacy that lasts. It's really a key to not just defining and curating, but fostering a family culture that thrives and then lasts the generations.
Yeah, for sure. It's not a thing, and it's not an event, it's a way of life.
Hmm.
And if you do it right, it'll be a way of life for the next generation as well. Otherwise, we wind up in retirement homes hoping that our children will visit us, and with at least the same frequency, but inevitably it declines. And if we wind up like that, statistically speaking, that's our own fault. So
Yeah.
we've really got to work now, more than ever, I think, because there's a lot of counterculture to this as well. But we've got to work now more than ever to create these legacies that will help elevate our family to the next level. And it's not that hard. It's not, you don't need Rothschild level wealth. You don't need to be a banking cabal. You don't need to, even have necessarily a family business, though every family should be in business. You don't need to feel like it's so off limits to you, because really it all just
Mm.
starts with your family culture and understanding, like you said, that everything's all interwoven. The choices that you make now are going to impact people you'll never even meet. So why not try and make the right ones?
Amen to that. Listen, Ben, thank you very much for coming on.
My
Um,
pleasure.
I don't know if you want to give a shout out to where people can find you, just to make
You can find
things
me
a
on
bit easier.
X or Twitter, x.com now. It's not twitter.com anymore. It's x.com/dynastis. You can just look at my name, Benjamin Black, and I'll show up. I have no doubt.
Perfect. Thank you all for listening, guys. I hope our conversation improves the man in dad schooling, and that there's a wealth of insights you can take away to build you and define and push into success your own family legacy. Thanks all for listening.
Thanks for having me.